Yes. It does make you
Anyway,
wonder. Yeah, sorry.
getting back to the reason why we're here is observations and thoughts on the Swarthmore lecture, which was given by Thomas Penny, and he spoke on truth in journalism and in general life. So the floor is everybody's at the moment. I don't think we need people to be called to actually speak, because we are a select bunch and we should be able to note.
Can I contradict you? Because I think one of the difficulties with Zoom is that it can appear that nobody's speaking because there's a slight delay in the transmission. So could I suggest that when we want to speak, we perhaps raise a hand, just so that other people are aware and they can either put their hand down or wave, you know, differently. Okay.
Okay.
All right. You didn't raise your hand, Ray.
Maybe if it's really important, it's really important to you at that point, you could wave both hands.
You know what?
You haven't got your hand up, Hattie.
You know what XR do? One finger means I want to make a point about what's going on right now, and the hand means I want to say something I'll hang about.
Angela.
Well, I thought it was a very profound lecture. I liked the fact that it was called Kinder Ground, because I think kindness is actually what every religion at the moment needs, and in its extreme form. And I think Christianity, for example, in Texas, where they're against a woman's right to an abortion and so on, is much needed. So to talk about it a week later is really difficult, but I do think, I think he touched on so many issues that are so important to all religions, all sects, all ideologies. And I found, it was quite difficult to sort of pick out points that, were more relevant than others. It was a brilliant lecture. Well done, well done, Thomas Penny, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I found it quite intense. What I liked so much was the next day, whenever it was, when we had the talk, when we could ask him questions. I learned a lot about him then, which was all, I was terribly impressed by that. He was so profound and so thoughtful in his replies. I was very impressed by that.
Yes, we did have some discussion about whether we should have, well, how we could have had a discussion sooner, if you know what I mean. But it was just, we measured the length, and it just wasn't really viable to put it in for us to talk about. We'd have had to decapitate or pick bits, so that's why we had to have it on our talk on a different week. But I do agree it's harder following a gap. I dutifully made notes, and I'm looking at these notes and they don't quite match what I remember, which is always a bit worrying, isn't it?
Yes.
Mary.
I thought it was a very thought-provoking, stimulating talk. But what I came away with, the realization what a length of time it could take to establish a truth.
Mm.
You know, he emphasized how much research needs to be done, the taking into consideration of the both sides of any argument. And we so often come to snap decisions.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I like the point where he said about truth being something which you find somewhere in between evidence and experience. And that's, you know, so much how I found it in life. I seem all my life really to have been juggling what you could call the hard facts, the solid evidence, with my experience, which was always, of course, more confused and confusing. And I think that Tom said that we think the truth has to lie in between those two fields of evidence and experience. And yeah, and you have to be seeking all the time. Yeah, it left me this awareness. You have to be continually seeking. You can't afford to stop and think the truth is here, because it won't be. It will be moving, even as you think. I think that's really good for us. It's about spiritual awareness. I think. So we seem to have lost Ray. So, Christopher, do you want to take over as chair till he comes back?
Right. Okay. I can do that. For Graham and Chris, we've decided to raise our hands when we want to speak, and then, well, in fact, I'll call people when they do that. So,
I think Mary's just.
Mary, you had your hand up at one stage. Would you like to unmute yourself?
I said my bit. I was just messing about on the screen.
Right.
Sorry about
Sorry. Yeah. Well, shall I say part of my thing? I also went to one of the follow-up sessions afterwards, and I wished I'd gone to both of them. I think I signed up for the second one, but it was so interesting. And having first met Tom 30 to 40 years ago, you know, and he's still, you know, you can see character traits that are still there, the kind of steadiness. But I think, yes, although I want to contradict Patsy, so I'm going to. I think as a journalist, at some stage, you've actually got to, you know, put pen to paper. Well, probably not anymore, but, you know, you've got to decide where the truth lies as far as possible. And although I agree that things are always changing, one of the things that tends to annoy me about Quakers is they talk about being on a journey, or, you know, blah, 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 but never talk about, you know, when they've, you know, they've actually, well, rarely talk about things when they found something that they found really helpful. Aha, our hero is returned.
Sorry about that. A call from another tenant who wanted to ask something about the incident I was involved with.
Ah, yes. Wow. I think the other thing that struck me about the lecture was the bit of, you know, other people's truths, because I realized, thinking about it afterwards, that I basically, you know, although there's the advice about believing, that you can be mistaken, which, I can be, and I can be wrong, but generally I'm right. That, and all right thinking people will agree with me. I thought that was it was an uncomfortable thing to think about, because I think I can accept that other people's truths may be different, but I mean, I know on a lot of things I wouldn't be able to believe that they were right. So yes, I wouldn't think their truth was truthful, I suppose. And it reminded me that I've slid back into old habits of not always being as truthful as I might be, i.e. I occasionally lie. So, Patsy.
I find it really difficult though, myself. I find it difficult to find a place between kindness and truthfulness. I'm aware that as a Quaker, I am committed to being truthful at all times, but I'm also aware that I have a duty of kindness, and they don't always. It's hard work shuffling the two pieces, the two cars, if you like, of kindness and truth. It is really difficult if you have a friend to whom you need to say something that you know will hurt them, but you feel that they ought to hear it. It's a difficult position to choose exactly how to do it. I wonder if we ought, in fact, be doing training for ourselves in how to be kind and truthful together. I don't know if other people have a problem, but it's not exactly a problem. I'm just aware of the difficulty, that's all.
Ray.
How far does one go to tell the whole truth? That's in some people within journalism will say it is my version of the truth, which is slightly skewed, and I suppose I am rather cynical in the fact that I have grown not to trust most journalists to tell me the actual truth.
Mm.
Julia, would you like to unmute yourself?
Very much agree with Patsy that it's not an easy line to get right as to when you tell the truth and when you are kind to people. It's a very hard thing to get that fine line at the right way to do it. And it's not always easy to find it.
Graham.
I made notes on the lecture, and my notes start with the fact that we were welcomed at 7:42, and in contrast to the quality of organisation of the rest of yearly meeting, I was disappointed that there was so little recognition of the fact that 700 or 800 people had been kept waiting for over half an hour for the lecture to start. It was acknowledged, but I thought they might have made a bit more of that. I was wondering whether to give up and do something else as an alternative. The lecture I thought was good, and it was good to be reminded of the basic problems of communication between any two people. that person A has an idea which they want to express. They put it into words of their language inadequately. Those words are heard by person B, who brings a whole different background and experience and knowledge to what is going into their ears. And that generates a conception within their brains, which may be very similar to what was in the original speaker's brain, but all too often it's different. So I have, like Thomas Kenny, problems with use of the word truth. I think it's helpful to think of there being an absolute truth, which takes into account actions and motives and backgrounds and everything else. And for Gandhi, absolute truth was synonymous with God. So the search for truth is the search for God. And it's always unattainable within the human lifespan. Thomas Kenny talked about different perceptions of the same incident as seen by different people, different positions from what they see. He was referring to the atrocity on London Bridge, which he saw as a journalist, but was seen by the police and other members of the public in a quite different way, not only because they were standing in different positions and saw limited amounts of what actually went on, but because of the purpose of remembering what they were seeing and reporting it perhaps to others. And that's just an example of the way in which absolute truth is unattainable. It depends on human beings with human fallibilities who bring very different experiences to bear on what they are witnessing with their eyes. He talked about the ways by which we receive information and can try to discern the truth, or as close as we can get to the truth, from what we read in the press and hear on radio and television. I thought he could have been rather harder on and more specific in his criticisms of British media. When you're abroad, as I was in East Africa and in India, you accept that the state television and often the press as well are biased because they are linked to the government or because they are in the hands of private owners who have a particular point of view to get across through their media outlets. And so you turn to the BBC as being neutral, always balanced, always fair. Now, I don't think that's true. I think all our access to press and media has to be filtered through a process which says, what am I not hearing about this story? I'll give you one or two examples from BBC. The coverage of the resolution that was passed at the Labour Party conference, criticizing the Israeli government and planning at least to bring in a policy of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the Israeli government. Did you hear about that on the BBC? I didn't. I've heard about it from other sources, but the BBC is silent so often when it comes to anything which is critical of the Israeli government. If you go to Al Jazeera several years ago, they did an undercover operation on the influence of the Israeli embassy in the Labour Party, which ultimately, of course, led to the destruction of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Did any of that get on the BBC? No, it was on Al Jazeera. You've got the case of the two Quaker meetings, one in Cambridge and one on the south coast, Brighton, which I referred to in an article I wrote for the Area Meeting newsletter in 2018, where both meetings had accepted a request from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign to hold a meeting in their meeting house. Both meetings were subject to pressure from the Israeli embassy or from the Board of Deputies of British Jews, trying to get them to refuse this. The same lobby groups for the Israeli government are operating in all our universities to try and suppress any groups or meetings which might increase support for the Palestinians. Now, I got limited sympathy for the Palestinian cause. I think Hamas in Gaza is a disaster, and what's happening on the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, is utterly shameful. But on the other hand, the resources available to the Israeli government, the Israeli Defense Force, almost entirely, of course, through American aid, makes the disparity in the forces available in this conflict absolutely gross. But you don't hear this sort of thing on the BBC or even in The Guardian. So the problems of finding anything like absolute truth are much better in this country than they are in many others, obviously. But they are still restricted and limited. And so we have to look elsewhere to get a more balanced view. And Thomas Kelly says, look wider, engage with people you disagree with. And that's excellent. And use your meeting houses to bring together people of different views and different experiences and create an atmosphere in which dialogue can take place and something like the truth can be reached with minds turning and being reshaped. Quakers live in this comfortable bubble of middle-class elderly people, most of whom have cars, don't depend on public transport, can get to meeting and have cozy chats together. And we've got to live more adventurously, I think, and look wider. And this is why I'm involved in the Bristol Interfaith group. And we ought to be trying to use our meeting houses to bring together people of different faiths, different political persuasions, who are not all Labour or Green Party supporters. You read the Daily Telegraph occasionally rather than The Guardian. Have your mind stimulated by intelligent argument from people you disagree with. And let's try and take those practices, and I certainly want to try and broaden my mind a bit.
Thank you, Graham.
I'm glad, Graham, you did not say read the Daily Mail, because I believe that's going far too far.
Yes, but how often do Quakers write letters to the editor of the Daily Mail protesting at what they have seen? It's this engagement that we need. We tend to write off the tabloid press. It's beyond the pale. This is not for sensible, well-educated Quakers to read, but we ought to.
Point taken, my friend.
Did send a missive to the Times recently. Enough.
Couldn't hear that, Jenny.
We could hear you speaking, but we couldn't quite make it out.
Right. I did send a missive to the Times recently. Would that be good enough?
It's
Great.
certainly good. Yeah. Sorry. I am actually quite ashamed of how seldom, I think it's once, in fact, that I have got around to actually writing a letter about my disapproval about something to one of the papers. It was the Guardian I was writing to, and yeah, that was my one occasion, and yet there've been dozens when I've wanted to and thought I should, but I haven't done it. And I think the idea of sending these letters, not just to the paper you read, but to other papers, is excellent. I'm going to try to put it into practice, Grant. So thank you.
Okay. I actually did write to the Guardian. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, right. I wrote after I'd gone to a private dental care because the NHS one wouldn't do a root canal for me during the lockdown. And I got a £1,190 bill that I wasn't expecting and nearly went bankrupt for about a month and a half. But I did actually indicate to the Guardian what was going on. And what is embarrassing, it succeeded with me to getting an absolute perfect dental care out of the NHS. But I'm worried about what's happening to other people still. And are they not getting as good a service as I now seem to be getting? So it's okay complaining, but sometimes you feel like you've helped yourself and you should be trying to change the whole system.
Patty?
Yeah, my goddaughter has exactly this. She needs a root canal filling and cleaning for a chronic infection of a root. And she has been visiting an NHS doctor who has indicated they can do the treatment, but they can't put more than an ordinary filling on top afterwards. And the filling would cost her hundreds of pounds. So she's getting treatment. She goes up to London for it because that's where she was resident when she registered with the dentist. It's a difficult situation, I think, root fillings, because it's a lot of work for. Anyway, so she is getting treatment on the NHS for the actual root canal treatment. And she's going to Bolivia for the filling because she's Bolivian. It'll be half price.
Ray?
May I ask friends something which is I have been discussing with brothers and sisters of my family, but I would like to widen it out a bit. How do friends feel about the last president and the choices made in the fact of saying there are alternative truths? Should we accept this, or should we stand by the fact that the unvarnished truth, whatever that is?
Hattie,
The last president of what?
America.
Oh, right.
Trouble is that the truth for one of us might not be the truth for someone else. And finding the facts are difficult for everybody sometimes. So although we might be absolutely appalled by some of the behavior that that man committed, to him, it is his truth, even if he has walked what we believe.
Julia, you're muted.
I just wanted to say, surely we cannot really believe any sensible person that what Trump thinks is what he really believes. Isn't he just doing what he needs to gain power, basically? Isn't that right?
I think one of the things in recent years with Trump and Boris Johnson and his cronies is there's actually been a change, because I think people in the past spoke their truth. It may not have been ours, but whereas now I feel that, some politicians were living in a fantasy land. And I think one of the things I've felt about the BBC recently, and in fact, I've been tending to watch other news rather than the BBC, is because they're, the government are talking about changing, their charter. They're bending over backwards to, to them. And, my guess it will not do the BBC one tiny bit of good at all. Anyway, rant over. Now, Angela, did you have your hand up or were you? Yes.
Yeah. Well, yes, this idea, I think the difficulty between humans of goodwill is that their truth may be very different. Can I just explain from my own personal experience? For 7 years, I was married to a Black Senegalese Muslim man, and I spent time in Senegal, which is 97% Muslim. And my mother-in-law, and I got on very well. Truth for her, I remember one of her relatives took on a new wife, which shock horror for me, but for her, the problem was, mais il a la presque abandonné. He had almost abandoned his first wife. So that was her truth and her problem. I think it's trying really hard to see that ultimate truths for us, strongly held, but thoughtfully held, in a different country may be totally relevant to their truth And it's very difficult to get, you know, meshing like this and not like that, you know, conflict. So I do think, you know, going back to Thomas Penny, I think he was really exploring those very, very difficult ideas of truth.
Graham.
Thomas Kenny made a statement I noted down, which I think is helpful. Truth, and I think by this he means as close to absolute truth as you can get. Truth is found at the interface of evidence and experience. You can't avoid bringing your own experience and knowledge to an issue, but evidence from people who are actually there and have had different experiences goes with that and always has to be included.
Sorry, Chris, was your hand up? Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, we've had some mixed responses to BBC reporting. I have quite a lot of respect for the BBC, which may be partly because an aunt of mine was a BBC producer, but that's not the only reason. On certain issues, I think they give a pretty good record. And they are willing, even under threats to the license fee system, they're capable of grilling a minister and asking awkward questions, and that's something I admire. On the other hand, particularly focusing on catastrophic climate change and the need for a really serious change in the way we live, move, and move around. The main news apropos lifting restrictions on flying as the COVID restrictions are lifted, the focus has been, great, we can fly more. No mention at all of the greenhouse gas emissions of those additional flights, just not mentioned. On the other hand, the BBC is presenting the works of Attenborough and Chris Packham, which are presenting us with just how much damage we are causing to our precious planet. But then that's not usually on the news. That's a feature film or a series of feature films, because they have a number at the moment. When I try and translate what I've heard from the BBC and from other sources to letters to my MP, Fengham Debonair, the Quaker mayor, and also I've just been writing to Lords various about the police bill. I find that I have to work hard to get fairly reliable evidence. We're focusing on the climate disaster, which we're already suffering. I refer back to the International Panel on Climate Change latest report and the Parliament's Climate Change Committee, both of which do seem to be willing to ask the really difficult questions and not bind them up with greenwash, as some people call it. But I'm still aware that there may be another side to the story, and time is relevant here. None of us, if a journalist on the radio or the television only has a limited amount of time to present whatever story they're presenting. If I'm writing to an MP or another politician, if I write a thesis, they're not going to read it because they haven't got the time. So I have to just refer to the best, most scientifically tested sources I can. I'm presenting this more as a problem than a solution, but that's what I do. I try and find out with my limited capacity, okay, what's the best report on this particular issue that I can pass on.
Jenny.
I'm signed up to an organisation called Full Facts, and they are the sort of organisation that work to try to tell the truth. And I wondered whether perhaps Chris's could contact them and see if they know more about the statistics that he wants. They're very, very good at unwinding misinformation coming out of the governments of the world and other people.
Could you say the name again, please, Jenny?
It's Full Facts.
Full
It's
Facts.
on Facebook, and it challenges Facebook's, but many of the issues that are going on there.
Chris?
Thanks very much, Jenny, and I will try and get as much as I can on from Full Facts, but I don't use Facebook because it has been a channel of serious misinformation. It was in the lead up to the election of Donald Trump, along with Cambridge Analytica. More recently, it's not being very careful about how it's used by young people who are being exploited by adults through Facebook. So there's a source of information which I actually myself don't feel comfortable using, because in order to use it, you have to give them permission to bombard you with a lot of other information.
I'll check if they're somewhere else as well, which I think they are, because they do come in on my emails as well.
Thanks.
Hattie?
I looked into Full Facts, and I like them, and they don't bombard me with emails, and every now and again I get some extremely good information from them, but it's selected, and I respect what they're doing. I subscribe to support them.
Patsy?
I haven't met Full Facts, so I'm not speaking about them particularly, but a friend of mine who does spend a lot of time looking at things like Facebook tells me about a trend. You've probably all heard of it, and I'm just a bit behind, but apparently there is some organisation or organisations who are using a front of being left-wing actually to promote incorrect information, which is in the interests of the right wing, and they are very convincing. Now, please don't think I'm saying that's what Full Facts is. I have no idea whatsoever, but she's very well informed, and it did sound to me as if they're, you know, I mean, I don't think that's rubbish. I just am quite unable to put a name to it, but I'm hoping that perhaps somebody else here has some idea of what she was talking about and can fill in the gaps. I don't know. No, sorry. I can't recall the name. Any useful names as clues. I will have to come back with this at a later date. We will all have moved on to something else. But it's a pity because, as I say, she's well informed. But I can't recall the name of the single organisation to which she refers. But it's something that does keep popping up on Facebook and is very convincing. and a number of friends of hers and mine who are definitely left-wing in their politics have become apparently incorrectly convinced by. So it's just some complication which is being introduced to public knowledge in order to confuse what is the truth. So, I got a good mind to ring her up and get the names so I can give it you. I could do that. Actually.
You could pop it in the notices next week, Patsy.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think Rosalind's the only person who hasn't spoken so far. Do you want to share anything, Rosalind, or?
Sorry, I'm hoping you can't hear the grass cutting that's going on outside. Like Graham, when I listened to the lecture, I jotted down all sorts of various bits and pieces. And I was struck in one of the things he talked about in terms of social media, that he said, Twitter fans the flames. And I was thinking, oh gosh, I feel sorry for young people because so many of them depend on social media, and almost can't live without it. But as Thomas said, they're getting almost like sound bites on things with no real context, no balanced argument, etc. And I totally got what he was saying, because if I use my phone to look up something, I might want to Google something, and before I even get to type in what I'm looking for, all these kind of sound bites from newspapers come up, and the most outrageous things like, the Queen called so-and-so a liar. You're thinking, what? And for some people, they would just accept that as a truth. And of course, it's just been used as a hook to get you to read the article, and you realize it's kind of a twisting of, whatever the real content is. So I think for a lot of people, they might not just stop and think. And I just think it's extremely, extremely hard for people to kind of pick their way around what is really true. And the other thing that struck me was Thomas's idea of groupthink. When he gave the example of governments where everybody thinking the same and not wanting to hear opposition to their core idea. And a number of you touched on this, the importance of being willing to have dialogue with people who are, complete opposite to yourself. But I think sometimes we're so afraid of having our truth challenged or questioned. And it was, I think Thomas talked about group loyalty, that somehow, and I suppose this could work for us as Quakers as well. We think, oh, what's the Quaker, think on this, or thoughts on this? And I would like to, remain faithful to my clan, if you like. And that again brings me back to the point about using our meeting houses for those kind of discussions, where we're open, and actually even to be able, when we're speaking our own truth, to be able to say, and I have heard so-and-so say the opposite, to show that you're informed. The other kind of thought that came into my mind is I signed up with a site called Nextdoor. Now I've moved to this new area, and I thought it's good to find out what's going on. It's crazy. I mean, it's everything from, I opened my front door and my cat was shaved. Somebody had kidnapped the cat and shaved all its fur off or whatever. But occasionally there'll be things like, you know, somebody saying, I need a plumber, can you make recommendations? And people will give, you know, this one was good, that one wasn't, and so on. But it got me thinking, we almost need a sort of Quaker equivalent of like a chat box or a you know, a discussion platform where somebody can throw out a question and different friends can pop in with ideas and thoughts, you know, because we're all grappling with different things at different times. And then you've got the smorgasbord of ideas and you can take whatever you want from it. Anyway, I'm looking forward to visiting the kinder ground. Thank you.
I think Jen has lost sound. I don't know. I think it looks like it's just Jenny. Is that right?
I can hear.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
There are sites which I go to which amuse me sometimes, and sometimes I think, oh, I didn't know that. One of them is a wonderful scandal sheet which used to be produced in Bristol, and some people will have known it, called the Bristonian. And that is amusing because of the sort of things they have on there. Usually they're trying to be awkward to the present council or something like that, but it's worth the occasional look. But the other one, if you're into politics and what is called parapolitics, a very delightful site is one called Lobster, which is a magazine which have been going around for years and years and years. And that is kind of a deep dive into the machinations of lots of different people who you may not even have heard of, but again, it's worth a look. Right.
A more respectable local media outlet, perhaps, is the Bristol Cable, which is an attempt to have truly independent journalism owned by and sponsored by local people who choose to be subscribing members. It's one extra thing to read, and it's still heavily based on the paper editions, but worth supporting, I think.
Yes, I've come across cable now and again, and I thought it was very good indeed. But it is the difficulty of the cost of distribution and getting it out to people. I mean, I never see it now that I can't go out. I don't see it at all, and I've forgotten all about it till you mentioned it. But yeah, have they got any sort of presence online, Graham? Do you know?
Hattie, you're muted, Hattie.
Yeah. The cable can post out to you. I get mine in the post. It's not very expensive. I subscribe to support them because I think it's an excellent local opportunity.
Yes.
I like their take on things and the articles they write. I like having it on my kitchen table.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Tell me again what it's called, please.
Bristol Cable.
The Bristol Cable. Thank you.
Like they may have just found 2 new supporters.
Carry on.
One of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet, which, I mean, personally, I was impressed by it, just because it made me think again, because instead of going into a meeting with someone you can't stand, thinking, how can I possibly get on with him because he believes completely the opposite to what I think? You have to say, no, what could I possibly find that I agree with him about? And that was quite an interesting thought, to try and think about it that way before you start. It gives much more possibility of actually getting on with somebody. Didn't hear. Did you hear?
Yeah, you were a bit quiet, Julia. Would you like to say that again, but a bit nearer to your machine?
Right. I'll try
That's
and say it
clearer.
again. I was very impressed. One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet that Thomas Penny talked about was when he's going into a meeting with someone who he thinks he can't stand. And he thinks, well, what, before I go into this meeting, what can I possibly find that I might agree with him with? And that was a very, I mean, it sounds straightforward and sensible, but you might not think of it unless you just stop and think first. That's how you have to approach these difficult people and try and get on with them.
That's it.
I guess as a GP, I met many people every day, and it was about their personal lives. And I flattened my reactions to each of them. Obviously, I could understand where they were coming from to a certain extent, but everybody had their own story and their own background. And I just had to make the assumption that they were coming from a different place from me. And yet we had to find common ground. So doing that repeatedly all my life, I probably have quite a lot of acceptance of difference. Could I also ask for the link to the lecture, because I didn't go to it, so I don't know. I haven't heard anything relating to, well, I haven't heard the lecture.
That could be my fault because I did, wait a minute, did I or did I not include a link to the lecture? You know, we sent it out last week. Help somebody, Chris. What was there not a link to the lecture with last week's session?
I don't.
Hang on a sec. We must have it. We've definitely got it.
I mean, if you just, if you want to hear the lecture,
Yeah.
you can either go onto YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and put in Swarthmore lecture,
Oh, yeah.
or you can go on the Woodbrook site, and I think you have to search a bit to find it, but I certainly, when I put it in YouTube, I found a few others that I'd not heard, so it was rather interesting.
Is your computer run by Steam, Hattie? It sounds rather like it.
That's the printer.
It would be nice to think it was being fueled by some green source, wouldn't it? But I know it's not like it. Well, I don't know. I guess electricity is a thing.
Well, friends, are there any more comments? Well, I think after that deafening silence, I think it's about time we went off and did our own things like searching for lunch and things like that. So thank you for coming, and see you
next week we have a talk on Extinction Rebellion by Rosalind Thayer.
Yeah, just to say, it's called Extinction Rebellion and Me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm terrified that people will think I'm setting myself up as some sort of expert. It's
Sure.
my experience. So I look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Bye.